And I'm just going to give us just a couple seconds. I like to make sure that that everybody gets in. Sometimes we have technical difficulties, and we are recording, so thank you so much for that. And if anybody has any questions, please enter them in the chat. We also, thank you, Ronnie, I will put you on there. And also, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we will ask them. At the end of the program, when John does the Q&A, if you're interested in talking, that's fine. Just raise your hand, wave a little bit, and we will unmute you. If you're not interested in talking, then just put it into the chat. So we welcome your questions, and we are interested in that as well. So I also, because I had not done this before, and two of John's previous programs, I would like to mention his book, which bad me, I've been really bad. I did not mention that John has a wonderful book, which this is our library copy, which we own, and it is also available wherever you purchase your books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can order it through your local independent bookseller. And I would suggest it to anybody who's interested in musical theater because it's super interesting. And I haven't gotten that far into it, but I've already liked it. And it's the kind of book where you can just kind of dip in and you don't have to go cover to cover. It's great. And that's John's book. And I just wanted to share that with everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John. I will mute myself and take myself off of camera. So take it away, John.
Thank you, Mary Lynn, and good evening, everyone. It is so wonderful to be with you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. You'll notice that my alpine hat is green in honor of this occasion, and how wonderful it is in this crazy time that we're all still living through to be able to take an hour and talk about and celebrate one of the most beloved stage and screen musicals of all time, The Sound of Music. Let me bring up the visuals and we can get started. For those who may not remember, The Sound of Music came along at a marvelous moment in history. Just as the 1960s were hitting, this show reached Broadway, and in the mid-60s, it reached the screen, just when audiences, I think, needed it most, as a reassurance in a time of change that one could live with change, triumph over it, and still live a life worth living. Let's get started. And to get started, I'd like to get one song out of the way immediately. But we're not going to watch, believe it or not, Julie Andrews sing this song. In 2001, she was one of the honorees at the Kennedy Center. Look at this stellar group of honorees. Van Cliburn, Jack Nicholson, Luciano Pavarotti, Quincy Jones, and the lady herself, Julie Andrews. Now, this was shortly after she had announced to the world that she would never be able to sing again, most likely. And while she can sing a note now and then, her voice really, because of a surgery that she went through to remove nodes after the Broadway run of Victor Victoria, she was not able to sing again. Well, that night on stage at the Kennedy Center, friends, colleagues, and stars of the Broadway community gathered to pay tribute to Julie. And this is how that tribute concluded. And the young lady who starts off the singing for this is Miss Rebecca Luker, who recently passed away. She was starring at that time in a revival of The Sound of Music on Broadway.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rebecca Luker. With the sound of music, with songs they have sung for 1,000 years. The hills fill my heart with the sound of music. like the wings of the birds that rise from the lake to the trees. My heart wants to sigh like a chime that flies from a church on a breeze, to laugh like a brook when it trips and falls over stones on its way, to sing through the night like a lark who is learning to
And now that there isn't a dry eye here, let's get started. And of course, we shall start at the very beginning, which of course is a very good place to start. And that story begins with Maria Augusta Kuchera. She was born January 26, 1905 on a Vienna-bound train. And travel would always be an important factor in this little lady's life. She was just 2 when her mother died of tuberculosis. Her father, who felt emotionally unable to deal with his grief and raise a small child at the same time, put her in the care of cousins who took rather good care of her. She was given a good education. She was raised to love music and was a devout Roman Catholic from childhood onward. In 1972, when Julie Andrews had her weekly variety series, one of her memorable guests was Maria Von Trapp. So here is Julie with the real Maria, who gives her a few pointers on the only thing she found not quite up to snuff in the movie.
Maria, there's something that I've always wanted to ask you. Now, you know, I played you in the picture, and you are you, and I am me, and since you are you, and I was you, and well, since you're here, and I'm here, and I was you,
Now, what do you want?
I want to know, how was I? Huh?
How was you?
Yes,
Really?
as you.
You were absolutely wonderful. But
Oh. But what?
remember that yodeling in the little goatherd?
Yes,
You know, Julie, there is yodeling and yodeling.
I was only yodeling, right? I see. Is there anything we can do about that?
Would you be interested if I show you a tiny little, genuine little Austrian yodeler?
Yes, I mean,
The
even
two of
after
us.
the fact, it's better to learn how to yodel properly, right?
The two of us.
All right,
Yeah.
teach me.
Tri-i-ho-i-yodel-dee-yo, tri-i-ho-i-yodel-dee-yo, try. Tri-i-ho-i-yodel-dee-yo, tri-i-yodel-dee-yo.
And I should sing that, right?
Yeah, please.
Okay. It seems to help clearing the throat. Tri-a-yodel-ee-yodel-ee-oh, 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 tri-a-yodel-ee-oh.
I cannot tell you how much I enjoy that. Maria graduated State Teachers College at the tender age of 18. She was an exceptional student, but instead of going on to teach as she had planned to, she instead decided that she had a religious vocation and entered Nonberg Abbey in Salzburg. Now, just for those of you who aren't familiar with the geography there, Salzburg is that little star in the dead center of the map, the red star. You'll notice Salzburg is on the border between Austria and Germany. Switzerland is way off on the side. Keep that in mind. We'll be talking about that later. And right there on the German border is this fairy tale town. It was the town that Mozart was raised in, and it was most famous as Mozart's hometown until, of course, the story of the Von Trapps and the Sound of Music would become part of that city's lore as well. If you look up on that hill right above the town, that is Nonberg Abbey. And here is a good close-up of it. It was founded in 714. Yes, 714 by the Benedictine order. It is a massive complex. And here is the actual entrance, which was used as a location in the film. The nuns permitted that, but they did not permit filming inside the abbey itself. You'll see that the actual abbey chapel looks very different from the one that was used in the movie, though the one in the movie is absolutely sumptuous. This is the sort of habit that the nuns wore. Back in the 1960s, when this film opened, I went to a Catholic school that had the Sisters of St. Joseph, who had a somewhat similar black and white habit, although the covering beneath the neck was rather stiff on theirs, not the soft cloth you see here. These nuns are contemplative. They are educators. They are into learning and teaching. Maria was a sincere novice at the Abbey, but it is true she loved to sing, and she just could not stop singing. Singing is what she did, even when it was totally inappropriate at the Abbey. Otherwise, she was rather well behaved. Well, to see if her vocation was serious or not, the nuns did send her off temporarily, they thought, to teach the children of Captain Georg von Trapp. Now, Georg Ludwig Ritter von Trapp was born in 1880 to a naval family. Remember, at that time, Austria was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so it reached down to the Adriatic, so they needed a navy. He was a submarine commander, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. In 1911, he married Agatha Whitehead. Her father was the English inventor of the guided torpedo. So during World War I, her family became fabulously wealthy, but they were wealthy well before that. During World War I, Captain von Trapp was Austria's most decorated hero on land or sea. Here you see him with his wife and 5 of their 7 children. There would be 2 more after this. But in 1922, Agatha died of scarlet fever. Some of the children almost went with her. That was a terrible scourge at the time. Here are the 7 Von Trapp children. Now you'll notice the oldest is a boy, not a girl. You'll notice none of the names match the names of the children used in the musical. Why is that? Well, it's because the authors of the musical did not want to have to pay each of the individual children for permission to use their identities. So they used fictionalized identities that did not match this set at all. That was probably a brilliant idea. It also meant that nobody could be insulted by little quirky, funny things that they would give the children to do in the course of the musical. So, and none of the Von Trapp children minded that in the slightest. Their father did use a Navy whistle because it was a large house and a huge estate, and it made no sense to scream to try to get the kids for lunch, for example. But he was not a disciplinarian. In fact, he, after his wife's death, let those kids run darn near wild. And they were considered an annoyance by neighbors and the people of Salzburg because there was no one keeping them in line until Maria came along. And Maria brought discipline. She brought her absolute devotion to the Catholic Church, and she brought her passion for music. Now, there'd always been some music in the house. Is there anyone who has no music in their lives? But it was central to her existence. Central to the captain's existence when Maria showed up was a Viennese noblewoman who Maria would only refer to in later life as the Princess Yvonne. And she always said that it was a pseudonym. It was not this person's real title or name. We don't know to this day who that noblewoman was, but in very short order, she realized that she was being supplanted in the captain's household by the governess to his children. She really knew that it was time to leave when Maria was made the head of household. If, like me, you love Downton Abbey, and we'll be talking more about that later, the head of the household is like Mrs. Hughes. It's a very powerful position, far more. She literally ran that palatial home. So that put her in charge of the whole works. If you've seen the movie, you remember that magnificent entrance hall. Now, the actual Villa Von Trapp is nowhere near that Baroque. As you can see here, this is the real entrance hall. It's quite spectacular in its way and certainly far bigger than my humble apartment in Morristown, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of local architecture. You can see from the outside, it's not the building that was used in the film, but it is a very grand villa. Why did the Von Trapps not go back to this after World War II? Very simple. From the time they left Austria, this house was commandeered by Heinrich Himmler, and he used it as his personal headquarters in Austria. And on at least one occasion, one of his overnight guests was Adolf Hitler. And that was why the Von Trapps said that they could never set foot in that house again, and none of them ever did. They would sell the house off at the end of the war in order to buy real estate in the United States, and we'll be discussing that later on. It was the children who fell in love with Maria first. They pushed their father to marry her to make sure she would never leave, never go back to the convent, and certainly not go to any other family. Well, the people of Salzburg were scandalized. It was a Schande. Maria was only 22 and the captain was 47. He was young enough to be she was young enough to be one of his kids. But that did not matter. They married in November of 1927. Now, in the movie, you get and in the musical, they seem to marry and go off on their honeymoon, and then the Anschluss takes place. Well, here it is a full 11 years before the Anschluss that Maria actually marries the captain. Why did she marry him at that exact time? Well, here's a photo of their actual wedding. And as you can see, it looks every bit as spectacular as the one in the movie. But you'll notice that Maria's dress is very generously draped. There was a reason for that, because their daughter Rosemary was born 2 months after the wedding. That's something the Von Trapps never liked to talk about. They're still not thrilled talking about it. But her immigration papers did not lie. And you know what? I'm not judging Maria or the captain, because the simple fact is the two of them remained utterly devoted to each other and their children for the rest of their lives. In 1935, the British bank where most of the Whitehead money had been saved collapsed, and the Von Trapps were wiped out. They had no money. All they had left was the house. They moved to an upper floor of that mansion and rented out rooms on the lower part of the floor. It became a giant boarding house. Remember, this was the depths of the Great Depression, and Salzburg was not immune. Against his better judgment, the captain finally agreed to let his wife and children start touring, performing some of the many folk songs and classical music pieces that Maria had taught them with the help of their local priest, Father Franz Wasner. Now, if you know the musical, you no doubt remember Uncle Max. Uncle Max did not exist. He is a fictional character, but he's based in part on Father Wasner, who gave up his parish to care for the Von Trapp family and become not only their chaplain, but their musical director. In 1938, the Nazis annexed Austria, marched into Salzburg, and one of the first things they did was invite the Von Trapps to perform for Adolf Hitler. They very politely refused. That was the first strike against them. The second strike was that the Nazis offered Georg a submarine command, as they do in the musical, and he had no desire to serve them. But the thing that forced the family to decide to leave the country, first of all, they despised the Nazis. They loathed them. But because the Nazis were wiping out the German population in the Jewish population in Berlin, suddenly Berlin's hospitals had a terrible shortage of doctors. So they were desperately looking for new doctors in Berlin. And Rupert, the oldest of the Von Trapp children who you saw in that photo earlier, Rupert was about to graduate medical college. And they insisted, in fact, that he come to Berlin, take a military rank, and serve as a doctor in a Berlin hospital. That's something Captain Von Trapp would not have. Bad enough that he would not serve them himself, but the thought that his son would become one of them was utterly unacceptable to the captain. So they left Austria, not by climbing every mountain, but by hopping on a train with tickets. They left legitimately. They simply had nothing in the way of much wealth to take with them. What little money they had, they brought. You remember how at the end of the movie, while they're singing Climb Every Mountain, Christopher Plummer leads the family up this steep hillside? Here's one of the great ironies of this film. The hillside that you see here is the hillside in front of Hitler's country home, the Ober Salzburg in Berchtesgaden, literally the house that looks over Salzburg. Had they walked up that hill in real life, they would have landed in Hitler's front yard. So that's, remember, what would be the point of escaping into Germany? Totally insane. But we give the movie its fictions. The Trapps became refugees. They performed in the free countries of Europe and eventually emigrated to the United States. Eventually, the captain and Maria would have 3 children of their own, along with the first 7. They built a very enthusiastic and profitable following all across the United States, first among German-speaking audiences, but then also among Catholic audiences who embraced them as, refugees from Hitler's Europe, and then just Americans, period. They were a charming family to watch perform. Here you see Maria's declaration of intention for citizenship. She and the whole family applied in 1944. And it was that same year, while touring in New England, that they discovered Stowe, Vermont. If you've never been there, it has so much to remind them of Salzburg, of the area of Austria that they came from. The beautiful rolling mountains, the sumptuous countryside, the climate was the same. And so after selling their house after the war in Austria, they bought property and started building up in Stowe. One slight problem: not one of them had the slightest idea what the hell they were doing building a house. So eventually they would have to hire professionals to come in and redo everything. But by the time they were done, they had quite a spectacular complex. This is what it looks like today. It's been added to several times. It was here that Maria and the children would hold seminars, and you could come on musical retreats and learn the family's secrets of performing, learn about the music, enjoy good food. It's also now, of course, serves as a ski lodge in wintertime. The Von Trapps thrived in the United States. They were this was heaven on earth after what they had been put through by the Nazis. Here are the Von Trapps. You'll notice that there are foreign supertitles. Just enjoy the Von Trapps performing in their unique style. Maria and the children not only do the singing, but provide their own musical accompaniment, and Father Wozner is their musical director. In 1947, Captain Von Trapp died of lung cancer. Maria held the family together and continued performing, but she became incredibly dictatorial. She realized that once her children started marrying off, that she would lose her performing group. So she would not allow the boys or the girls to date. She was incredibly controlling. She wouldn't let them off the grounds of their home in Vermont when they were at home. Eventually, one of her daughters literally had to escape the complex and elope. And one by one, eventually, the children did move on with their own lives. But for a time, Maria did keep things going. Their recordings were highly popular. Some of them are still out there, not just on LP as in this case, but you can find them on CD. There's even a very wonderful recording that I have of the Von Trapps singing the songs from The Sound of Music. They were thrilled with the success of the musical, both on stage and on screen. Here you see one of the ads for one of their tours. And you can see the children are not exactly youngsters at this point. They're all adults. In 1957, 10 years after their father's death, Maria finally had to give up the ghost on this and disband the Von Trapp family singers. They've since reunited on occasion, and now, over the years, the children's children and grandchildren have formed singing groups and gone out to perform their material. In 1949, Maria's story of the Trapp family singers was published. It became a bestseller and remains in print to this very day. Well, 1956, a German film company did a movie that you can find on YouTube in English, the Trapp family, Die Trapp family, as you see here. It was tremendously successful in Europe, and it did find an audience in a dubbed version here in the United States. One of the people who saw and loved this film was Broadway director Vincent Donahue. He so loved the movie that he got on the blower and called two of his old friends. In the middle of this photo, you see Miss Mary Martin, and off to the far left, you see her husband, her second husband, Richard Halliday. In between them is their daughter, Heller Halliday. And of course, standing next to Mary, on the other side of Mary Martin, is her son from her first marriage, Larry Hagman. Now, Richard Halliday and Mary Martin were a power couple in the theater. She had starred by now in South Pacific. If you remember our talk a month ago, she had won a Tony for her national tour of Annie, Get Your Gun. She was a major star in the 1950s in several shows, including, well, Peter Pan. At Vincent Donahue's suggestion, they bought the stage rights to the book for $200,000. The movie rights already belonged to that German company, but $200,000 was a lot of money, and Maria was delighted to have it. Maria Von Trapp put it toward her missionary work, which had become her passion in late life. Then Halliday and Mary Martin called an old friend of theirs, Mr. Leland Hayward. He's forgotten today, but in the late 50s, he was one of the powerful movers and shakers, an agent and producer, both on Broadway and in Hollywood. He had discovered Katharine Hepburn and made her a film star. He had so many accomplishments to his credit. And he had a few Broadway hits to his credit as well. He had been a producer of South Pacific, producer of Call Me Madam, producer of Mr. Roberts, and oh yeah, he produced Mary Martin's smash hit, Peter Pan. He called two old friends of his, L and C. That's how people referred to them in the theater community, because L and C were such a team. Howard Lindsay and Russell Crouse. They were the most successful playwriting team the American theater has yet known. They had a few hits to their credit too, including the script to Anything Goes, State of the Union, the Pulitzer Prize-winning play that became a hit movie for Tracy and Hepburn, and the record-breaking play Life with Father, which ran longer than any other book or musical until I think it was Fiddler on the Roof that finally surpassed its record. They were thinking, Howard Lindsay and Russell Crouse, of adapting Gypsy Rose Lee's autobiography Gypsy into a musical. A lot of people were interested in that project, but they were very interested in doing the Von Trapp project. So they suggested, why don't we add a few songs? You know, we can do some of the original numbers that the Von Trapps are known for, but how about getting R and H in on this? Well, if people in the theater knew who L and C were, everybody in the Western world in 1959 knew that R and H meant Richard Rodgers, and Oscar Hammerstein. They had a few hits to their credit: Oklahoma, Carousel, South Pacific, The King and I, the honor roll of great musical theater. They were very interested in this project. However, they were going to be busy for a year. They were in the middle of bringing Flower Drum Song to Broadway, a show that has fallen out of use, but oh, what a marvelous score and what tremendous charm. Mayoshi Umeki, as a Chinese immigrant trying to face this huge thing called America, it's quite delightful in its way. But everybody said, hey, we'll wait for Rodgers and Hammerstein, no problem. Leland Hayward at that point was co-producing Gypsy with David Merrick. Lindsay and Krause had given up on Gypsy, but they could take that year to work on the script for the Von Trapp show, the libretto. Oscar was thrilled that all he would have to worry about was lyrics. He hated having to write scripts, as good as he was at doing that. And it was while working on this show that he went in for an annual checkup, and his doctor said, everything looks good, Oscar, till I get these test results back. Is there anything you want to ask about? And he said, well, yeah. I keep waking up in the middle of the night with this terrible indigestion, but I go to the kitchen, I get a glass of milk, and it tends to settle it, and I can go back to sleep. Well, his doctor ran a couple of additional tests and found that Oscar had what was at that time inoperable stomach cancer that was at an advanced stage. There was nothing that could be done, just ameliorate the pain. This would be his last show. Rodgers was heartbroken. The only member of the cast who they told was their longtime friend, Mary Martin. It was for this show that he wrote his last full song, which was Edelweiss with Rodgers, that beautiful, beautiful song. It was also for this show that the very last lyric he wrote, when the show was in Boston trying out, he walked up to Mary and put a piece of paper in her hand. And she read it. It was an introductory lyric. In the second act, Maria is sitting with Liesl, and they sing a reprise of 16 going on 17. And the little lyric that he added for Mary Martin was, a bell is no bell till you ring it. A song is no song till you sing it. And love isn't love till you give it away. Love isn't love till you give it away. Every time I now hear that, it breaks my heart that was the final lyrics written by this giant of the musical theater. Now, my personal connection to the musical is this. I was born on October 3rd of 1959, 9:30 a.m. at Astoria General Hospital in Queens. It's now called Western Queens Hospital. Here I am a couple of days later in one of my first photographs in my grandmother's arms. And it was on the night of October 3rd. How could I have known that because I was stuck in the cradle, I missed the world premiere of The Sound of Music at the Schubert Theater in New Haven. So I get to share a birthday with one of my favorite musicals. That's not bad for someone who loves these things the way I do. The show was clearly a smash hit from its very first performance. They made some changes. They tweaked here, they trimmed a bit there, but there were no major changes needed to the show. It was sumptuous. It was beautifully done. Mary Martin's costumes were done by the designer Maine Bochet. He's also sometimes pronounced Mainbacher, but is normally pronounced Maine Bochet. This wedding gown that he designed for her was a became a fashion event back when Broadway could be a fashion event. And I have actually held this costume in my hands when I was a volunteer at the theater collection for the Museum of the City of New York. It is still in beautiful condition and will be shown in exhibits in the future, I am sure. The show opened on Broadway on November 16th of 1959 at the Lunt Fontanne Theater. It's a huge 1,600 seat theater. It's big. You don't want to sit in the last row in this theater, but most of it is perfectly lovely. Back then, the theater was blue. As you see now, it's all painted in shades of gold. And named for two people Mary Martin loved very much, the actors Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne. Here, introduced by Tom Bosley, a little bit of the wonderful Mary Martin.
You. From Rodgers and Hammerstein's The Sound of Music, Mary Martin.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Thank you very much. A few years ago, two very talented gentlemen, Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rodgers, wrote a song for me in The Sound of Music that sort of became an international anthem for children of all colors and creeds. Tonight, I would like to sing as a birthday present for children all over the world, including my very own granddaughter making her debut, Mary Devon DeMeritt. Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. When you read, you begin with A, B, C. When you sing, you begin with Do, Re, Mi. Do, Re, Mi, Do, Re, Mi. The three notes just happen to be Do, Re, Mi.
Do, re, mi.
Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti. Wait, I'll make it easier for you. Now sit down and we'll all listen, okay? Okay? Do, a deer, a female deer. Re, a drop of golden sun. Mi, a name I call myself. Fa, a long, long way to run. So, a needle pulling thread. La, a note to follow. So, T, a drink with jam and bread. That will bring us back to Do, oh, oh, oh.
Do,
A deer, a female deer.
re,
A drop of golden sun.
mi,
A name I call myself.
fa,
A long, long way to run.
so,
A needle pulling thread.
la,
A note to follow. So,
ti.
a drink with jam and bread.
That will bring us back to Do. A deer, a female deer. Re, a drop of golden sun. Mi, a name I call myself. Fa, a long, long way to run.
So, a needle pulling thread. La, a note to follow. So,
Ti,
a drink with jam and bread. That will bring us back to Do. When
mi, mi,
you
so, so,
know
re, fa, fa, la, ti, ti.
the note
Mi, mi, mi,
to
so, so,
sing,
fa, fa, la, ti, ti.
you
Mi, 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 so,
can
so, re,
sing.
fa, fa, la, ti, ti. Mi, 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 so, so, re, fa, fa, la, ti, ti.
Do, a deer, a female deer. Ray, a drop of golden sun.
Mary Martin never lost that natural magic. Just a few months after the show opened on August 23rd of 1960, Oscar passed away at his home in Doylestown, Pennsylvania at the age of 65. Now, it's traditional in Broadway souvenir books for the star of the show to appear in photos with the authors of the show. That was fine with Mary Martin, as you see here, with Rodgers and Hammerstein on one side and the playwrights on the other. One slight problem: all of her successors would not be able to pose for such a picture. Well, back in a world before Photoshop, we had something called X-Acto knives. So what any good publicity person would do is take an X-Acto knife, carve out the face of one of Mary Martin's replacements. In this case, I believe it's Martha Wright, who did the show after she did. And notice how the next set of publicity handled this photograph. Here's Mary Martin, and here's her successor. You'll notice that it's Mary Martin's body, Mary Martin's dress, and Mary Martin's shoes. It's just the other actress's face. In case you didn't get that, there's the original, and there the adjusted with the applied face on top. Nancy Dussault would be the last of the Marias on Broadway, and she, I think, did more than a year of the run. She ultimately, the New York production ran for 1,433 performances, a tremendous Broadway run at that time. Florence Henderson and John Myers starred in the first national tour, and ultimately Florence Henderson, it's believed, gave more performances as Maria than any other stage actress. She would continue doing it throughout her life in regional productions and in limited runs, and ultimately did thousands of performances as Maria. I wish I had seen one of them. London in 1961, its production ran even longer than the New York production. The British adored this show. Critics on both sides of the Atlantic referred to it as The Sound of Mucus, said that it was painfully corny, that it was a throwback to the days of operetta, and audiences then, just as today, didn't give a rat's patootie what the critics thought. They loved this show. Now, 20th Century Fox in the early 1960s was in desperate trouble, all of it due to the movie Cleopatra. Now, I love this film. It's a lot of fun. There was the scandal of her falling in love with Richard Burton and dumping Eddie Fisher, just as Eddie Fisher had once dumped Debbie Reynolds to go with Elizabeth Taylor, and Rex Harrison, who kind of felt left out because for once he was the well-behaved person on a film. But between the stars and the budget going out of control, this film, originally expected to cost $3 million, cost the then devastating amount of $40 million. It earned about half that much at the box office. Now, back in the early 1960s, $20 million was about all that any movie could hope to make commercially. But darn it, Cleopatra, even making the most that it could, threatened the studio with complete financial extinction. One of the things they had the rights to was Rodgers and Hammerstein's Sound of Music, because they had filmed Oklahoma and Carousel successfully before. So they called on Ernst Lehman to write the screenplay and on Robert Wise to serve as director. Now, Robert Wise at one time had been editor for Citizen Kane. Why did they call on these two men to make a musical? Simple. These two men had just completed the film version of West Side Story, one of the finest film adaptations of a Broadway musical up to that time. So they were quite literally the perfect natural choices to do this. Now, casting was going to be tricky. 20th Century Fox wanted the #1 female star of the early 1960s, and that was Doris Day. Now, Doris Day might have been a superb Maria. Heaven knows she would have been up to the singing, and her charm would have been wonderful. But Richard Rodgers did not care for Doris Day. He put the kibosh on that plan. They considered Anne Bancroft, who had just won the Academy Award and the Tony the year before that for The Miracle Worker. Her chemistry with children on screen was proven from The Miracle Worker with Patty Duke. But she wasn't quite up to the vocal demands of playing Maria. Neither was Audrey Hepburn, who would very soon be doing another. They didn't want to have a dubbed singer, which is what she, of course, would be at almost the same time in My Fair Lady. It was Richard Rodgers who finally said, look, there's only one actress who makes sense in this role. He pushed for Julie Andrews. She had just completed the movie Mary Poppins. It hadn't been released yet. And she was in the middle of filming the Americanization of Emily. When Rodgers and the team making The Sound of Music saw scenes from those two movies, they realized she was exactly what they were looking for. And of course, Rodgers had worked with her, along with Hammerstein, on the 1957 smash hit television version of Cinderella, which they had written for her. So they knew what a solid talent she could be in a Rodgers and Hammerstein project. Now, to play Captain Von Trapp, the studio's first choice was Bing Crosby. Frankly, I think Bing Crosby could have been sensational as Captain Von Trapp, but he was under contract to Paramount, as he had been for many years, and they were not willing to let him work for another studio. What a loss that was for Crosby. But it opened the way for the casting of a young Canadian, Christopher Plummer. He had already become a sensational success on both the London and New York stages. He was devastatingly handsome. He was married to Tammy Grimes back at that time. And his daughter, Amanda Plummer, came from that marriage. He did not like the idea of playing Captain Von Trapp all that much, but he went for it. He was furious when he found out that his singing would be dubbed. And he would eventually get even with this film by a few years later in 1971, coming to Broadway in a musical version of Cyrano de Bergerac and winning the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical. He just wanted to rub that one in the faces of anyone who had denied him the chance to sing for himself as Captain Von Trapp. The children were all unknowns except for one. If you go all the way to the left, the third girl from the left in the light brown dress, that's Angela Cartwright. She was well known to American audiences from her work in American TV sitcoms, but no one had known her as a singer. Some of the children sang for themselves and some of them did not. They were chosen primarily for their acting and for their visual qualities. Carry on. Now, Peggy Wood, who played the role of Mother Abbess, she had been a Broadway star since 1916. No kidding. But now, half a century later, while she was still a formidable actress, her singing was no longer quite up to snuff. So her singing would be dubbed, something she felt bad about. But she won tremendous acclaim for this performance at a late stage in her life. As for the nuns who sang with her in How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, one of them is of particular interest right there. That's Miss Marnie Nixon. Marnie Nixon, this is the one and only time in a major Hollywood film she gets to provide a voice for herself. Up until now, she had been the voice of Deborah Carr in The King and I and the singing voice of Natalie Wood in West Side Story. And she would very shortly provide the singing for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. But Sound of Music is where she gets to be there for herself. Some of the filming, quite a bit of it, in fact, was done in and around the town of Salzburg. Oh, Lord, when they had to film on that mountaintop, the weather was relentless. So relentless that at one point they retreated into a farmer's barn on the side of that mountain. And to warm them all up from the terrible chill, he offered them his homemade schnapps, which was about 5 trillion proof. Julie Andrews, who has never been a drinker, downed a shot of it without thinking, nearly passed out, only to have them shout, "The sun is out, let's do a take." They zoomed out onto the mountaintop. The helicopter zoomed in over her, and when she tried to do the twirl, she landed flat on her keister. That is not, of course, the take used in the movie, but the next one is the one that is so celebrated to this day. If you remember in the movie, there is a scene where you see the Nazis marching through Salzburg town square. Originally, this was supposed to be their entrance parade when the Anschluss first occurred. They were going to have hundreds of extras, waving flags and shouting at the soldiers. And as soon as the town fathers of Salzburg saw those swastikas go up on the town hall, they came out screaming, "Nein, nein, nein, we cannot do this, nicht. We're not going to allow it." And Robert Wise, the director, said, he was so taken aback. He said, "But it's in our contract. We don't care what's in the contract." Remember, 1964, it was less than 20 years since the end of the war. Too many people remembered that god-awful black spider. Too many people would be affected by being reminded of how Austria had accepted the Nazis. And Robert Wise says, "I did not know what to say until my assistant said to them, 'Oh, it's no problem. If you don't let us film that scene, it's okay. We will just use newsreel footage of Hitler driving through the streets of Salzburg as your citizens shout Sieg Heil. We'll be more than happy to use that.'" At which point they said, "Well, no, we don't want that. If you just leave out the cheering crowds, you can do whatever you want and just keep the swastikas to a minimum." So that's why you see the scene as it is now in the film. Bill Baird in the early 60s was a New York treasure. His puppet shows were the joy of children here in the New York metro area. And his whimsical puppets are the ones that we see in the Lonely Goat Herd scene. It makes that number so memorable. Here are those puppets. Today, they are preserved at the McNeater Art Museum in Mason City, Iowa, which is where Baird has them stored to this day. And they are one of the biggest attractions in that museum. The number Something Wonderful. You may notice in the movie, most of the number is not this well lit as this promo photo. That's because they were performing all of this in a gazebo that was in an interior studio, a studio that still used lights that had been there since before World War II. This was just near Salzburg. Well, those lights had lime inserts that would go sounding like dive bombers coming in. And throughout the filming of that number, Christopher Plummer and Julie Andrews kept cracking up every time those noises would go off. So to hide their smiling faces, Robert Wise changed his plan and filmed most of the number in the silhouette form that you see in this photo, just to hide their reactions. Julie got along beautifully with the children. To this day, they get annual contact from her, wishes on their birthday, notes at Christmas. She's still in touch with them. There was a lot of truth in this chemistry.
Why does it do that?
Well, the lightning says something to the thunder, and the thunder answers back.
The lightning must be nasty.
Not really.
Why does the thunder get so angry? It makes me want to cry.
Well, now, when anything bothers me and I'm feeling unhappy, I just try and think of nice things.
What kind of things?
Oh, well, let me see. Nice things. Daffodils. Green meadows. Skies full of stars. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. Bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. Brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into springs. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
Does it really work?
Of course it does. You try it. What things do you like?
Tootsie Roll Up. Christmas. Bunny rabbit. Chocolate icing.
No school.
Pillow fight. Telegram. Birthday present. Any present.
Yes.
Ladybug.
What?
Cat. A good sleep.
Oh, gesundheit. See what fun it is? Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Oh, cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Oh, together. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into springs. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites. Well,
The film was made for a measly $8.2 million. Even then, that was a reasonable amount of money for a movie musical. Today, you couldn't produce a Broadway revival of the show for that kind of money. It earned $286 million, which is the equivalent of 1.2 billion in today's dollars. It won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and it remained in general release for an astounding 7 years. Nowadays, it's a miracle if a film stays in general release past 7 weeks. Some have said it may be the most viewed film of all time. It's certainly up there with Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. I know I personally have seen this film more times than some people I know have hairs on their head. I can't begin to calculate how often I've seen The Sound of Music. It does have the top-selling soundtrack album of all time. Anyone my age, we grew up in our homes with this record as part of it. Even if your family wasn't really into musicals, everybody had the LP to The Sound of Music. The legacy of this film is extraordinary. It was done several times at Jones Beach Theater, starring Constance Towers. Any of you who have ever been there, it's an 8,000-seat outdoor theater with a lagoon between the audience and the main stage. And they would float in the Von Trapp mansion or float in the Abbey. The scene changes were quite spectacular there. Amateur productions, this show has been done by every synagogue, Catholic church, school, high school, college, and community theater in existence. In 1994, I worked for a company that produced and managed a national tour of the show starring Marie Osmond, which set box office records, which stood for more than a decade. She was that popular, and I'll tell you, she was marvelous in the part. Rebecca Luker, who we saw at the start of our talk, starred in the 1998 Broadway revival. When she left the cast, oh, by the way, here's a memorable moment that took place after a performance of that revival. On the bottom row are the children who were playing the Von Trapp kids in that 1998 production. Just above them in the middle of the photo are the actors who played the children in the movie. And above them are the actual Von Trapps. In some cases, they are the children of the originals because the originals had passed. This was this is the only time that this photo had ever been attempted. What a delightful memento. When Laura Benanti left the show, her understudy, Laura Benanti, took over, and Richard Chamberlain took over as Captain Von Trapp. This was the only time, and still is the only time, that the two leads were played professionally by actors who were the same real ages as Maria Von Trapp and the captain. I saw these two, and I can tell you it was the best Sound of Music cast I have ever seen. She is now a Tony Award-winning star, but Richard Chamberlain was a revelation just as much as she was. What a joy to see the two of them in this show. It was revived successfully in London in 2006. In 2013, Carrie Underwood starred in an NBC live production, which treated the score beautifully, but I can't say much about what it did in terms of acting. There wasn't, it was a very uneven production. There are sing-along Sound of Musics. If you've ever been to one, they've done one here at the Morristown Community Theater once. It's just wonderful. Everyone joins in and sings along on the numbers, and they have hilarious things that you cry out to the screen. And before the screenings, they have costume contests. People come dressed as different characters for the film. Once I went to a live Sound of Music sing-along, and the person who won came in a giant gold lame costume dressed as a drop of golden sun. So the more creative you are, the better. In 2015, Downton Abbey star Julian Ovenden and Cara Toynton starred in a live British production, which they just reran on PBS this past week. It was quite delightful. In that production, Maria Friedman, one of my favorite London stage stars, played the role of Mother Abbess. And here, I don't think that there's a more perfect way to end this talk than as Rodgers and Hammerstein chose to end this musical. Oscar Hammerstein specialized in endings that grabbed you by the heart. This show and this finale is certainly no exception. The Von Trapps, the Nazis have gone. The Von Trapps are ready to escape over the mountain.
I've been listening to the wireless and all the roads are blocked. The borders are closed.
I've always thought of these mountains as my friends, standing there protecting us. Now it seems they've become my enemies.
Never your enemies. Haven't you read? I shall lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help.
Georg, I know that mountain as well as I know this garden, and so do you. Once we're over that mountain, we're in Switzerland.
But the children.
We can help them.
Father, we can do it without help.
You'll have help. For ye shall go out with joy, and be led forth with peace. And the mountains and hills shall break forth before you into singing. Follow every byway till you find your dream, a dream that will need all the love you can give. Every day of your life, for as long as you live, climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow, till you find your
If you have never seen that version, it's available on DVD. I think it's absolutely sensational. Marilyn was nice enough to mention my book, Musical Theater History, which has a foreword by my good friend, Oscar Hammerstein III, grandson of Oscar II. And I also have a website, musicals101.com. It is 800 plus pages on the history of musicals on stage, screen, and television. It's not there to sell anything. It's there to celebrate the joy of musicals. I'm going to end the screen share and bring everyone up. Let's take a look in chat and see if there are any questions. And I see there already are. And I'll start by answering questions there. Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day. Yes, the grandchildren saw them in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Yes, they also have performed in New York. Someone says here they visited Stowe. It is a beautiful complex up in Stowe. I got to visit it one day. Absolutely beautiful. The sing-along version is a riot. Did I see it at Paper Mill? I know that they did it at the community theater. They may have done it at Paper Mill too. Paper Mill has done so many productions of The Sound of Music. I've seen so many wonderful productions at Paper Mill. Of all the things I miss right now with theater being shut down by the pandemic, oh, how I miss Paper Mill, and how I miss the community theater here in Morristown, and oh, how I miss live events at our wonderful library. If there are any East Ender fans, Cara Toynton is still on the WLIW episodes being shown. Yes, she is. She was also in, what's the show named after the man who founded the department store?
Are You Being Served?
No. What?
Oh,
Selfridge, Mr. Selfridge.
Selfridge.
She played Selfridge's oldest daughter on the last 2 seasons of that show. At the beginning of your talk, who joined in the singing when Julie got the award? Oh, let's see. Kristen Chenoweth, Robert Goulet, Jeremy Irons, Patrick Wilson, Audra McDonald, and of course, the star of The Sound of Music. Could you spend a few words about the roadshow release the film received? Oh yeah, in the 1960s, and they started this actually in the 50s to make big expensive films more of an event to go see. You would open you would have only 1 or 2 showings a day. It would be reserved seating. You would charge more than a standard movie seat, which in those days was much cheaper than they are today. And you would get a souvenir program. It was almost like a theatrical experience. MGM did that with Gigi. They opened Gigi at the Royale Theater on Broadway. They showed the movie in that Broadway theater, and you got a souvenir program. You paid more than a standard seat. And that worked so well, it increased interest in the film. When people can't see something, they want to see it more. So that increased interest. When the film went into general release, everyone wanted to see it. Sound of Music opened as a road show like that in certain cities. I was in 2nd grade when The Sound of Music came out. And I was a student at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Catholic School in Astoria, Queens. And the Sisters of St. Joseph booked a full movie theater, the Lefrak City Movie Theater in Lefrak City, Queens. It's a huge housing neighborhood. It's not a complex, it's a neighborhood. And Lefrak City had a theater with like 1,200 seats in it, and we had 1,100 students. So that worked perfectly. There was room for the students plus the parents who came along to chaperone. You may remember in that movie, there's a scene where as the Nazis are getting ready to go after the Von Trapps, they get into their cars, the cars won't start, and 2 of the nuns look at Mother Abbess and say, "Mother Abbess, we have a confession to make. We have sinned." And she says, "What is your sin, my daughters?" And they pull out the carburetors from the cars. There were some Catholic students who didn't like their nuns. The Sisters of St. Joseph at my school, we adored our nuns. When we saw the nuns had saved the Von Trapps, 1,100 kids from 1st to 8th grade were on their feet screaming. And for once, the nuns did not ask us to sit down and be quiet. They enjoyed it. And that is still a warm, I eventually, after graduating college, taught at that school for 4 years. So I have very warm memories of the woman who had been my last elementary school principal in 8th grade was my first boss after college. And that was where I got to do my first teaching. I have great memories of the sisters and of my Catholic school years. What is the relationship between Max and Elsa? They are friends. They are best friends in Vienna. Elsa, also known as the Baroness in the movie, they don't use they call her that more in the film. Max is a government performing arts official who runs the arts, the Performing Arts Festival in Salzburg, and he's desperate to find performers, and she's one of those wealthy. What he says in the movie says everything. It's also in the play. I like wealthy people. I like how I live when I'm with them, and I can understand that. Glad to those who are saying thank you. Paper Mill did do it in 2012. I remember when they did it. About 8 years before that, and I love what Paper Mill does with The Sound of Music. They do Rodgers and Hammerstein with such tremendous affection. Did they consult with the Von Trapps for the musical or the film? Yes. They did sit down with Maria. Maria had sold off all of her rights early on when she sold them off to the film company, and they had to buy some of them back from the film company, and it looked like Maria wasn't going to get much of anything on the project. So Rodgers and Hammerstein and Mary Martin all each took a little piece of their percentage and put it together for Maria, and then later on for her family to always get something. It was only fair. It was their lives that were being used. Maria was on hand in Salzburg during the filming, and you can't really see her, but at one point during that scene in the Salzburg town square where she's walking, where Maria's coming through singing, "I have confidence in sunshine," behind her, you very quickly see three people walk behind her. They're a little far away to see, but it's Maria Von Trapp and two of her daughters who were in the city for this. Why was the song moved? Very simple. In the original play, My Favorite Things is something Maria was singing in the Abbey, and Mother Abbess asks her to sing it with her. And it's a beautiful duet for Maria and Mother Abbess. It's quite charming. It makes sense that way. In the play, for those who haven't seen it or who have forgotten, when Maria the thunderstorm takes place, to calm the children down, she sings Lonely Goatherd. Well, Robert Wise, who knew how to turn a play into a film beautifully, and I think Sound of Music is a masterpiece of that, he came up with the idea of the Bill Baird marionettes, bring in the marionette show and make the Lonely Goatherd a visual knockout. It is a visual knockout to this day. He was absolutely right to do so. And so he said, just take My Favorite Things and give that to Maria and the children. Mother Abbess still has plenty enough to do singing Climb Every Mountain. And they were absolutely right about that. Yes, Elena Shadow played Maria at Paper Mill. I was there. She was part of the performing arts program at Steinhardt. She graduated the year before I started teaching there. They were always very proud of her. I also saw a production there when Robert Cuccioli was Captain Von Trapp, and he was marvelous in the role. The revival at Lincoln Center in the 90s. That was done by New York City Opera. Deborah, what's her name? Boone, Debbie Boone played Maria Von Trapp. My buddy Lawrence Guittard played the captain. It was a wonderful production. I realized Elsa had a much bigger part. Oh yes, she's got two songs. Why were they cut from the movie? In part because Eleanor Parker could not sing a note, and neither could the actor who played Max. They were not singers. And it's a shame because those are two of my absolute favorite songs in the show. One of them is where Elsa and Max realize, you don't have any of the pleasures of poverty. How can love survive? No rides for us on the top of a bus in the face of the freezing breezes. You reach your goals in your comfy old Rolls or in one of your Mercedeses. Brilliant, brilliant. And a wonderful number that they sing in the second act with Captain Von Trapp called There's No Way to Stop It. They're trying to tell him, don't, you dear attractive dewy-eyed idealist, one day you have to learn to be a realist. You can't go up against the Nazis. There's no way to stop it. No, there's no way to stop it. No, you can't stop it even if you try. I did a concert version of the show with my students when I taught elementary school. We couldn't afford the rights to do The Sound of Music. It's about $2,000 if you want to do a few performances of the show, even back then. Well, we couldn't afford that, but you could do a concert version of the show for a very small amount. So we did that, and No Way to Stop It was the showstopper of our first act, because I had my little fourth graders turn into two groups that acted like two giant revolving groups of kids, and they went churning around the stage, one group churning in one direction, the other in the other. And I'm not kidding you. Years later, I saw the original production of Ragtime use the exact same idea in the opening number. So either they saw me, or boy, it was a nice accident. Yes, so Elsa does have two songs. Did anyone else have a question? You could put it into chat or raise a hand. James, from your iPad, were you raising your hand? If so, unmute yourself and ask. Possibly not. Then I will guess that we have all, has everyone been covered? Let me look over the room. Okay. Thank you all, first of all, so much for being part of this. The Sound of Music is one of my most treasured joys in life. And to share it with all of you tonight has been a really special treat. Here's looking forward to the day that, look, I've gotten my first vaccine, get yours.
Me too. Me
get
too.
Safe. Be well, so that we can all do this in person again soon. I want us to be back in that basement at the Morristown Library and just celebrating this stuff. It deserves to be celebrated. And you all deserve a big hug. Please take that from me. And thank you for joining me to celebrate one of our favorite things.
Thank you, John.
What a memorable day.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you,
Very
John.
well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Wonderful.
Thank
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And if anybody has any questions whatsoever, please shoot me off an email and I will answer your questions. And thank you again so much to John. And this was just so delightful.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mary Lynn.